the Happy Scientist Podcast. Each episode is designed to make you more focused, more productive, and more satisfied in the lab. You can find us online at bitesizebio.com/happyscientist. Your hosts are Kenneth Vogt, founder of the executive coaching firm Vera Claritas, and Dr. Nick Oswald, PhD, bioscientist, and founder of Bitesize Bio.
Hello and welcome to the Happy Scientist Podcast from Bitesize Bio. If you want to become a happier, healthy, and more productive scientist, you're in the right place. Now, normally about now, you would be hearing from Nick Oswald, the founder of Bitesize Bio, since he is generally the host of these podcasts. But today, I'm going to be guest hosting. I'm Kenneth Vogt. I'm the founder of the executive coaching company Vera Claritas. And the reason I'm hosting today is we have a very special guest, Dr. Nick Oswald. We're going to be interviewing Dr. Nick Oswald on a very important topic, and this is a topic that he has spoken about from university stages, and it is this: is the lab the only way to be a scientist? Now, this is an important topic because there's a lot of ways to have a career in science. The lab is certainly one of them, but it's not the only one. So you might be wondering, well, what are the other possibilities? Well, you're going to find out when we talk to Dr. Nick Oswald, because not only does he know about the topic, he's lived this topic. He has been in the lab, and he did leave the lab, and yet he continues to be in science. So you might be asking yourself, wow, how can I do that? I would love to have that possibility in my life. So that's what we're going to discuss today. And we'll begin with just a straightforward question to Nick. Why did you start out in science? And did you have a clear idea of where you were going to go in your career when you started?
Yep. My very first inkling, I was extremely, I had two first inklings of what I wanted my career to be. And I was very sure about the direction and about, the destination. And that was, I wanted to be a football player, a soccer player, and a rock star. One after the other. Younger was a football player, then I realized that my feet didn't work in that way. And then I wanted to be a rock star. And I was actually, up until I started doing my PhD, I was still convinced that was the way to go. And I was about to go touring in my band at the time and everything. And then life took over. But as far as science went, then I knew from quite early on in high school that I wanted to be a scientist. It was just something that interested me. At the time of me being in high school, my mom actually was studying to be a nurse, so she did it from scratch. So did science, did a half a science degree and then into nursing. So that was around me in that kind of formative years, and I just found it quite interesting. And I thought it explained the world fully. It was great. So I thought I was definitely going to do that. And it kind of that say about age 13, 14, I was pretty fixed that that's what I wanted to do. And that then lasted for about 15 years or something like that. So that I wanted to be a scientist in a lab.
Great. Now, we may have to have another entire episode on how to be a rock star, and Nick is also qualified to talk about that, but you've probably heard mention of some of that stuff in past episodes, and I'm not going to drive into it right now, but it's an interesting topic.
As long as you put rock star in quotes.
Well, it's something you just said is pretty interesting, this notion that you had that I wanted to be a football player and a rock star, because the notion sometimes that we have is that, well, I can only do this one thing. If I'm going to be a scientist, obviously, I can't be anything else. There's no possibility. But that's not necessarily true. You may find that you do have room in your life for multiple things, and that's part of why structuring your career is so important, to leave you room for other areas of expression and other ideas. Now, another thing, go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to say that's an interesting point, because at the times when that's a joke, and I always start those careers talks with, these were my first career aspirations, but it is just kind of a joke. But it does illustrate something that you just said there. At the time I wanted to be a footballer, that is all I wanted to be. At the time I wanted to be a rock star, that's all I wanted to be. And then I decided to be a scientist, that was all I wanted to be. And then it's come full circle to actually, I wouldn't like to be a rock star, but there are some elements of that I want to have in my life. There are some elements of science that I want in my life, and there are other things, and I can mix them up. It doesn't have to be one thing.
Sure. Another thing that I heard in your comments that's interesting, and many people may relate to this. How many of you made these choices when you were a kid? You know, Nick's talking about being 13, 14 and deciding then to be a scientist. Now, you're an adult now. Did you make a good choice as a child? I mean, you would have made a choice from a childish viewpoint at that moment, but it doesn't mean it was a bad choice. But then again, your rationale for what you chose may be completely different now. So
it was. I mean, it turns out that it was a good choice, but in the end, I think that one of the core tenets of what I would preach about career development is that there is no one way, and that there's no bad choice unless you really box yourself in. And it happens that what setting out on the journey into science gave me was that it put a series of options in front of me. I took some of those options, then I saw other options and moved on from that. And the whole kind of my whole kind of career advice would be based on look for the options and keep moving in the direction that excites you the most, and put the work in. So in that regard, I think with any starting point, you could get where you wanted to go. I mean, look at where Richard Branson started, for example, nowhere. And so although there, and it's what boxes you in is the mindset, is not having, for me anyway, is the idea is not kind of being conscious that you need to keep options in front of yourself and then blocking yourself off.
Right. Now, I imagine you and everyone else out there who's ever worked in a lab would agree with this statement. You didn't get there by accident. You had to work hard to get into the lab. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah. I think that certainly it's easier for some people than others. For me, it was definitely a study hard scenario. And my daughter's just got come out from her first round of exams in high school with 6 A's, and everyone's like, yeah, that's, of course, it runs in the family. I never got an A in my life, So
weird.
Yeah,
don't broadcast that. Nobody knows.
No, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter though. It doesn't matter because it's it's what you do with what you've got. It's the important thing.
Exactly.
But yeah, to get into the lab, basically all you have to do here is get a decent undergrad degree and you're off. But it takes some dedication and some work. Yeah, but I mean, it's okay. I think it's a bit overhyped. It's not rocket science. We're not making rockets. No. Okay, maybe that's doing it a disservice. But it was hard work, but not.
Gonna have to point you back to the episode on imposter syndrome.
That's the Scottishness. Downplay everything.
Well, so the reason I brought that up is a kind of to segue to another question, because you did make an effort to get into a lab, and many people have, but yet you ended up out of the lab and in Bitesize Bio. So how did that happen?
It was kind of like my career path went in ever decreasing circles, or like a spiral into closer and closer to what I wanted, I think. So the kind of potted chronology is that, so I finished my undergrads. I was torn between, do I tour with my band or do I try and get into the lab? I wasn't sure whether I wanted to be in the lab, so I tried to get a job as a technician. I found that impossible without a PhD. No one wanted to look at you. So I spent 6 months. I decided not to tour with the band. We probably weren't good enough anyway, but maybe that's imposter syndrome. And I applied for every technician job that was available. This is Scotland, not the west coast of the US, so there's less options, but still I couldn't get anything anyway, for whatever the reason was. And I ended up working in a supermarket for 6 months. Well, I'd been doing that all through my undergrad anyway. And so I contacted the university that I did my degree in, which was my hometown university, asked if they had any PhDs. They said, we have one left. And and so I took it. That's not how to choose a PhD. So I went in. It was certainly an education, let's put it that way, for good and bad reasons. And I slogged my way through it. I didn't enjoy it. And by the end of my PhD, I made the decision that I didn't want to continue in academia anymore. And but I still wanted to. I would say I was going to say I still wanted to be a scientist, but I'm not sure whether it was that. It was just that I couldn't really think of another option that excited me. Oh, that's I was applying for jobs as a forensic scientist as well, but I couldn't seem to make that break either. So I got a job in industry. I went into industry. I really landed a fantastic job in a company in Denmark, who were making automated devices for drug discovery. We were inventing them from scratch, which was really, really unusual and interesting job to do. I stayed there for a couple of years. We had to move back for family reasons. I got a job. Again, just default. What do I do? I'm a molecular biologist. I'll apply for molecular biology jobs. I got a job in another great company here in Edinburgh. And I was in there for 6 or 7 years. But all through that time in industry, I was kind of like, this is an okay fit, but it's not a great fit for me. I'm not very green fingered. I always tended towards training people, towards helping other people do well, to get the most out of themselves. And that's what interested me. And so 2007, blogs became a thing. And I thought I saw other people making blogs about things that they knew about and making little businesses out of them. And so I thought, well, let's give that a go. So for 3 years, I worked still working in the lab, and as a hobby, well, it was more than a hobby, because I was getting up very early to write these things. I had 2 small kids at the time, well, 1 small kid at the time. And so I would get up at like 5 a.m., write for 2 hours, get everyone ready for in the morning, then go out to work. And I did it, thank goodness at the time, I did it, for once in my life, I had some discipline. I did that. And and Bitesize Buy grew its own legs. So the decision to kind of, that's one big junction point for me if I look back at my career path, is that I just decided to follow something that inspired me. And because I was inspired, I was able to do something stupid like get up at 5 a.m. every day for a year and write blogs. But I was really excited about it, so it gave me the energy. And then it took its own path. But even if Bitesize Bio itself hadn't have been successful, just getting involved with Bitesize Bio and what I learned and the connections I made would have changed my career trajectory anyway, towards the direction that I wanted to go into. So yeah, it's an interesting junction in my career. I think if I look at it as just making the decision that I wanted to do something different and then acting on it.
So here you are, getting up at 5 a.m. You have no idea where this is going to go or if it's even going to go anywhere. Were you happy?
I was tired, but I was really excited because I thought it's at that point, the blogosphere, if you want to call it that, was and actually publishing in general was kind of like the Wild West, and where it was in such disruption that there was a lot of opportunity there to establish yourself. And for some reason, I latched onto that. I saw that. I could see other people doing it, and I thought I was really excited about doing it. So in a way happy, in a way very tired, but yeah, still I was glad to have the direction, because before that I was stagnating in the lab and I was looking around, I was applying for stuff, I wasn't getting it, and it was kind of a bit sad.
Got it. So now it's years on by. Shoot, you mentioned 2007 there, and here we are in 2021. Are you happy with it now?
It's Yeah, it's definitely different. I'll put it this way: I did make the right choice. It doesn't mean that it's easy or all hearts and flowers. It's a challenge to do this, but I would say it's a challenge that I enjoy, and it's mostly on my own terms. So I really appreciate that part of it.
All right, cool. So now that you've had the experience of going through this, is there anything you would have did different? Would you change how you've approached it all?
It's a bit like, okay, when I was doing my PhD, right, I lived on this road in in Dundee in Scotland, and to get to the lab, I had to walk up this hill that got more and more steep as I went up it, as you went up it till you got to near the top, and it was just ridiculously steep. And I always used to think that this was like the illustration of what a PhD was like. That and because you get 3/4 to the top, you're committed, so you have to go and do that hard bit anyway. And I think that I know when I look back at my PhD, it's something that I'm really glad I did, but I wouldn't want to have to go back and do it again, but I would if I had to, if you see what I mean. And it's exactly the same with the business. The business has been like, running Bitesize Bio as a business or developing it into something that is commercially viable has been exactly the same experience, where it's something that there's been a lot of enjoyment, a lot of difficulty, a lot of sweat involved. And I wouldn't do it differently, but I wouldn't like to have to do it again.
Okay, fair enough. So you've taken what maybe we could call a non-classical path in science. You didn't graduate and head to a lab and stay there for the rest of your career. So what would you say to somebody who'd like to be on that path themselves?
I would say that that classical path is actually probably the classical path in quotes. You get a job, you get your PhD, you go in a lab, you do a postdoc, you blah blah blah, you carry on, get a lab and all that stuff. That's actually probably the minority of scientists do that now, because there are so many people doing science and so little, comparatively little positions available, especially senior positions. So the first thing I would say is to realize that if you're at the early stage of a scientific career, realize that path is an option, but it's not like it used to be. I think that the mindset certainly when I was in undergrad, which was admittedly quite a while ago, last century, as I like to say, then it was kind of like, well, this is probably what will happen. It's a bit unusual to do something else. That will have evolved from then, but I think that the prevailing mindset is still in the background, that we still call them alternative careers in science. And it's not, it's actually just careers in science, or careers that you can launch into from science.
Yeah, that's a very important distinction there.
The fact that that career path in academia, or a parallel career path in industry exists, doesn't mean that it's, and again, that talks to what you've made the title of this talk, is the lab the only way to be a scientist? Or is it, I would say, is a career in the lab the only way to develop your career, your science-related career? Because I wouldn't consider myself a scientist anymore, because I'm not doing science, but I certainly have a scientific background, so I'm in the industry, so I can have some understanding of what it needs, and I can apply my skills to that to add value. And that's what a career is. How can you add value to whatever industry you're in?
So would you think it'd be fair to say that perhaps it was a naive understanding of the world that might have caused you at one point to think that the only way you could go forward is to be in the lab, and maybe that was never true? Maybe that was never really the likely path, and we would have to broaden out our understanding if we wanted to make a life in science.
I think that's partly true, but partly not true. I really genuinely loved the idea of being a PI and stuff, and having my own lab and stuff like that. Probably I had a bit of a naive understanding of what that would entail, but mostly for me, mostly what didn't fit for me was it just didn't excite me when I started doing it, and so then I couldn't put in the overdrive, if you like, that the people that really excites can do. So it's difficult to compete. But when I found the thing that really excited me, then I was off. Then I had the jet fuel, and I could do it myself.
Great.
But I think that having that kind of, you're 19, 20, 21, whatever, and you can see this path and you think it's exciting, I think that's perfectly fine. And I think that nowadays there's more awareness made of hey, this might not be a career in the lab for you. I mean, that was there when I was doing it, but I thought that I would do it. I thought that I would. I thought that I was going to cure cancer and stuff. That was my, that was the way that I went into it. But I think having an awareness that what this is about isn't a pathway as such. It's a series of choices, and you can relax into that and just keep looking around. I think what people, and I certainly was guilty of that at a couple of points in my career, as I didn't look around, I just took the next default step. And for example, when I took a job as a molecular biologist, when I was kind of sure that I didn't enjoy science very much, I didn't enjoy bench work very much, but I needed a job, and so I did that. And so it's, yeah, I think it's about really getting your keeping your options open and being aware that there are other options at all times, and just keep on choosing, keep making conscious choices is the important thing, rather than having that naive, here's a pathway, follow it, and if you fall off, you're one of the unlucky ones, which is the kind of was the prevailing wind when I was involved in that anyway.
Right. So when you were first learning, especially when you're first in university, I'm sure you saw some things as, here are some foundational things I need to learn. I need to learn about chemistry. I need to learn about molecular biology. I need to learn about basic biology. And you thought of those as the fundamentals. But what have you actually found are the real fundamentals for a career now?
Yeah, so I mean, for me anyway, and it's about being happy, and about, which is why one of the reasons why we have this podcast, The Happy Scientist, and for happiness, it's about not fitting yourself to the job. It's about that sounds naive, because you can't always fit the job to, you can't make the job fit you. That's what I've done, but I did it in a different way from probably. I was going to say it might not be available, but I guess it is available. How would I say that? So what are the fundamentals?
Absolutely. We are here to inspire Nick's competition. We would love to see what the next wave looks like that makes Bitesize Bio look like it's old school.
That's coming.
It is coming.
That's why Bitesize Bio keeps trying to be new school. But anyway, that's a different matter. But the fundamentals are to keep, again, I would say go back, make your own choices, or keep making conscious choices. Keep looking out for, are you inspired? Are you enjoying this? When you're putting in extra work, does it feel like a joy or does it feel like a slog? And if it feels like a slog, then you're probably not putting your efforts in the direction of something that would inspire you. So have a look around, and it might take different, it might mean taking a step back and before you take a step forward. But most of all, it's just, you need to have something in front of you that's inspiring you. So whether at one point for me it was, I'm going to cure cancer, that was like, great, okay, so I need to know all this stuff, and that drove me. That gives you the jet fuel. And then that wore off, and so I need something else. I need another thing to aim for that'll help me propel in the direction. And again, that helps you to marry it up to what's exciting for you and what you enjoy. And then, just keep seeking skills that could help you. Keep adding skills. Don't stay in the same rut. Keep trying stuff. I mean, when I was at the bench, I would always try different ways to do things and different ways to, improve my systems and improve my protocols. And I guess hopefully everybody does that, but maybe that's, teaching granny to suck eggs or whatever that expression is. But it's all about, don't just follow other people. Make a path for yourself. And one other thing as well about, that keeping things in front of you, about staying inspired, looking for opportunities is, and I saw this at my kids' school, it was a careers thing. And I can't remember what the exact stat was, but it was either 3 out of 10 or 8 out of 10. But let's say it was 3 out of 10. 3 out of 10 jobs haven't even been invented yet. 8 of 10 jobs that could become available to you haven't even been invented yet. And actually thinking back, that's what happened with me. Blogging, the internet hadn't been invented when I was an undergrad. Well, it had been invented, but it hadn't developed into anything when I was an undergrad. And so if you don't keep your eyes open, then you miss these opportunities as they come up. I don't know whether that's too fluffy, but that's what I just keep saying to my kids. It doesn't matter what you study. I mean, it doesn't matter what direction you set yourself in, as long as you keep inspired and you just keep trying your hardest. You keep putting your most into it.
So one thing I keep hearing here that I think that some people are going to react to, how is this not just being totally narcissistic? Like, all that matters is what makes me happy and what I like, and how do you answer that criticism?
For me, it's that whole thing about if you can't put you're sitting in the plane, the oxygen mask come down, you put the oxygen mask on the kid sitting next to you, and you fall over because you don't have any oxygen. You have to look after yourself first. But at the same time, I'm not running a loan sharking business, or I'm not, a member of a criminal gang or something like that. I'm doing something that I genuinely think is my best contribution to this industry, and the best contribution that I can personally make with my specific skill set and my specific, desires. If I'm doing something that if I'm working in a job where I'm not happy, I am not going to be able to give my most to that. So that might be that, working away at something that you're not enjoying and kind of self-flagellating to keep going on it, even though you don't enjoy it. That's not narcissism, but it's kind of, what is it? It's kind of it's martyrdom, I suppose, in a way.
Right. Yeah, this reminds me of the first 3 episodes of the podcast talking about human needs, your own human needs. You do need to be aware of them, but you need to be aware of them for the point that you make, that so that you can do your best, and presumably your best for the good of all. That the science is here to serve. That it's just that simple. Science is not self-serving. It is all outbound. So if you're going to be a part of that, you're going to have to stoke up your own fire so you have something to give.
Yeah, that's the thing. The best you can give is the thing where you are on fire,
Right.
and you're not on fire unless you're inspired.
Sure. So let's look at the opposite side of that then. And what would you say are some of the common barriers you see that stop people from evolving their career in a healthy way?
Well, if I look back to myself, then so while I was still in the lab, I wanted to get into, I kind of had an idea that I wanted to get into some sort of publishing or training or something like that, where I wasn't at the bench, but I was supporting the people at the bench, which is what I was better at. And one of the things that kind of made me stay, made it take a while for me to get out of that, was that what I did was I just thought inside the box, if you want to use a really trite expression. What I did was, anytime I saw a publishing job come up, I applied for it. Anytime I saw a job that was training, I would apply for it, and maybe I would do some speculative applications and think I was doing really well. And that's a fine thing to do, but I didn't start to get any results until I started thinking a bit more laterally. And as I alluded to earlier, even just writing Bitesize bio, I picked up the keyboard, the pen, started writing, started getting a little bit of traction. Even if no one had read this thing, it meant that then I could go to a job interview and say, well, here's my blog, and this is what I want to do. This is what I'm interested in. Here's something that I've done that's out of the ordinary. And so that's evidence that I'm, although I don't have experience in publishing, I am self-starter and I'm motivated and all that stuff. And that was enough for me to get my first move out of the lab was I got a job as a journal editor, and literally the thing that got me that job was Bitesize Bio. And then I subsequently got a job for another publisher as a consultant. They came to me, which was quite astounding, and for me anyway at the time, and offered me a consultancy job because of Bitesize Bio. So again, however that maps onto people's individual situations will be different. But one piece of advice would be to just try and think as laterally as possible, and don't be boxed in by only the opportunities that other people are presenting you. Obviously take a look at those opportunities, but see what you can make for yourself, even if it's just small. You can start something. The famous quote that I always say is that Bitesize Bio was started by a 500-word article, and that's what got it moving, and it's still one of the biggest articles on the website 14 years later, which is quite funny.
And that goes to show it was enduring in some.
Yeah, but anyway, I mean, that doesn't map onto everyone else's situation, but the kind of core message is try and just rattle the cage, do what you can to start making some momentum for yourself. And then the other thing that could have stopped me, but luckily didn't, well, to be fair, as you know from the conversations we've had over the years, it could have stopped me at any point in the last 14 years, is fear. Is fear of taking the next step into the unknown. You have to trust yourself. You have to just shoot and try and keep shooting. And if stuff doesn't work, keep taking shots. That's that. I think that's probably the number one reason why people don't get where they want to go. Is because they settle for something less than what they want. They just stop because it's too scary, or
they try one thing, it doesn't work out, so they don't try again.
Yep. Or they keep going, they just run out of steam, and maybe part of that could be that the thing that you're aiming for is not inspiring enough for you, so it doesn't give you enough jet fuel.
So we've mentioned obviously being in the lab is one possible career path, another is publishing. But are there other possibilities for what somebody might do and still have a career in science?
I mean, there are endless possibilities that probably, again, a lot of them probably haven't even been invented yet, but that'll appear in the next 5-10 years. So it's important to keep your eyes open in that regard. But there are other people more qualified than me to talk about the variety of options. But and I think, to be fair, that universities now are much better at showing people what these options are. Traditionally when I was at university, it was, you could do anything from, you can move into marketing, you can be an accountant, you could be a lawyer, you could, specializing in science, all sorts of stuff. But it just grows every year. There's more things every year that you can do. And there's also probably more option to take risk and do something for yourself as well, year on year as well.
Right. Well, there we have it. And folks, if you go to LinkedIn and you look up Nick Oswald, you're going to see a pretty interesting resume. But I will venture to guess that there are plenty of people out there with interesting resumes. They've done a lot of different things, and that's not actually all that exceptional. It's what happens. It's how you make your career. It's how your career becomes more rich. It's because you try different things, and some of them stick. And you can't worry about the fact that not all of them stick. Sometimes you try something and it runs its course, and that's the end of that. Well, that's fine. Move on to the next thing. All right. Well, then I will ask you then, Nick, the final question. Is there anything you'd like to say to wrap up this notion of how to have a career in science?
I would say one other thing that we can do as people rather than scientists is try it and take in, like one thing I've done over the last 10 years is read hundreds of books about different aspects of you getting the most out of yourself, different ways of looking at the world, different ways of, ways to live your life and so on. And those, just, again, it stops you from getting stuck in your own perspective, and gives you. I think one of the most important skills I've developed is to try and be. Again, I'm not putting myself as anything like there's still plenty of flaws there. I'm not meaning anything like that, but that I'm quite able to kind of look at other people's point of view and see how it would work if I looked at it in that way, if you like. And so that means that you can derive value from literally anyone's perspective on the world if you can get yourself to do that.
Yeah, it's a shortcut.
Yep. And so one book that I would, that sticks out above the rest for me, that is an accessible way to break open how you look at your career. It's a book called, so again, this isn't a perfect fit for science, but these things don't have to be. You just have to be able to lightly take on the perspective and see how that can inform what you do. So, or the way you approach things. So this book is called it's a catchy title, Be a Free-Range Human, Escape the 9-to-5, Create the Life You Love and Still Pay the Bills. Okay, so this is about, running your own business, which might not be what people want to do, but actually that's just a marketing thing. Fundamentally, it's about what is a career and what is a job and how can you add value in a way that suits you and still, be a contributor to the world.
Right. We'll get a link to that into the show notes.
It's by a woman called Marianne Cantwell. So again, it's one of these things. There'll be bits that you read it and go, oh no, but ignore those. Just take in the good parts and see if it does anything for you.
Yeah, just like when you were in grad school and you were sitting there in lecture. It's all the same. Yeah. All right. Well, excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much, Nick, for letting us pick your brain and being a guinea pig for those out there that would like to see how else they might develop their career in science. And since you walked the road, it's nice for you to share.
Yeah, thank you. I enjoyed that. You're a good interviewer, Ken. Should do that more often.
Well, we will. Next, we will have to do one in the future on you as a rock star because there's plenty to talk about there. Well, and it will apply. I will make it apply back to science. I promise you, it's going to work out. So I know Nick is skeptical right now, but I'm not. I'm going to make this happen. All right. So there's a few other things then to mention at the end of this episode. Of course, you can always come see more about The Happy Scientist at bitesizebio.com/thehappyscientist. You'll see every episode listed there, and you can dig in. You can talk to us. We can have some conversation back and forth. You can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/thehappyscientistclub. So there's a couple different ways that you can interact with the content here at The Happy Scientist. And we want to remind you that the first 9 episodes of this podcast are fundamental. They are foundational principles that everyone should learn, and you really ought to take the opportunity to listen to them. The first 3 are on human needs. The second 3 are on core mindsets, and the final 3 are on charisma factors. Now, if any of those things spark something in you, if you care about what you need, if you care about your mindset or other people's mindsets, and if you think charisma might be useful in your world, you should check these out because you'll probably have noted we refer to them all the time, but there's so much there just in those episodes that we couldn't cover just by a comment in ongoing episodes. So please go back and listen to those 1 through 9 and get an understanding of these life-changing concepts. And hopefully, as a result, you can be a happy scientist.
And I would say if your charisma doesn't feel like a thing that you want, that interests you or whatever, get over it. Just listen to these things. In the spirit of what I said about the Free Range Human book, just try and absorb this stuff that people are offering you and get what you can. If you get one thing out of everything you listen to, one tiny grain of aha or progress or whatever, then it's worth it.
Well, there you go. Well, you've heard it from the horse's mouth today, folks. So we'd like to thank you for visiting us. And so at this point, we'll sign off. So thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Ken.
Okay, bye now.
Scientist is brought to you by Bitesize Bio, your mentor in the lab. Bitesize Bio features thousands of articles and webinars contributed by hundreds of PhD scientists and scientific companies who freely offer their hard-won wisdom and solutions to the Bitesize Bio community.